so let's get started. We have had some questions about the word fiduciary, and we get a lot of real estate rags, is what I call them, are Inman News, Georgia Realtor, Realtor Magazine, if you're in the commercial arena, commercial, things of that nature. And I also believe, and it's been 26 years for me, but I also believe in post-license, I do recall instructors telling us our fiduciary responsibility. Now, the reason I can say that I remember that is because I was licensed in 1996. And what happened was that fiduciary situation changed in Georgia. Now, there are some states, California, Texas, those type of states that still have a fiduciary duty to their customers and clients. But in Georgia, we do not, and there's some confusion about that. We state these things, and then we do the opposite, or we do the opposite and don't state these things. So today, I thought I'd kind of clear that up for everyone, because I hear it quite often when people call for broker questions, well, my responsibility, or I don't hear it so much from the agents as much as I hear it from your customers and clients that say, well, I don't think they had my best interest at heart. I don't think they did this. I don't think they did that. So we're going to talk about a new word, or a new statement, I should say, that you should be making instead of fiduciary. All right? Any questions about that or anything else before we get started? I'm going to attempt to share my screen. So Carlin already gave me the thumbs up that she was able to see it. I need to share my sound. Can you see that? Anyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right, so let's get started. As you all know, when I host the broker chat, I always remind you that even the slightest mistake can end up costing you money and stress and reputation. And I think the more important is the reputation and stress, because we need to have some self-care and take care of our mental health and our bodies and things of that nature. And you don't want to have a short-lived career by tarnishing your reputation. So I like to always remind everyone. So we're going to our talking point today is going to be about fiduciary and reasonable care. Reasonable care is what Georgia adopted in the 90s, not fiduciary. We did have that originally, but it switched. And so if you've been in the business, 20 plus years, you remember that word fiduciary all the time. You probably read a lot of articles, as I said earlier, that talk about that. But you have to understand, you're in Georgia, that doesn't apply to us. So what does fiduciary look like? So in order for you to understand the difference, let's take a look at what that looks like for other states. You always disclose any information to your clients that will help them in negotiating. Not always. You could have a transaction broker or customer situation in Georgia. And there are two ways to look at this fiduciary, from the seller's point of view and the buyer's. Let's look at the buyer's point of view. So if we were a state of fiduciary, that means when we represent the buyer, the seller has expressed a willingness to accept a lower price than they're asking, anything that's affecting the value of the property, any past or existing offers or counteroffers, how long has the property been on the market, whether the broker has an existing relationship with the seller, seller's urgency to sell a property, and any factor information that will help the buyer obtain a property for a lower price. Okay, now, you and I both know on this call today, there are agents, and maybe you have, we don't raise hands, have said these things or done these things. That is not a fiduciary responsibility. So if a buyer accuses you of these things, you may have done them, but you had no obligation or duty to do it. Okay, so let's look at the seller side. When representing the seller, you must disclose whether you have a relationship with the buyer. We do that in the situation of dual agency, and we do that in writing. So we have some things in Georgia that our contracts will ask us to disclose, but that doesn't make it a fiduciary. Identify of anyone who has placed a bid, all offers made to the seller's property, whether the buyer is willing to pay a higher price, any information that would affect the seller's ability to get a higher price, and whether the buyer has an intention to subdivide the seller's property or resell it for a higher price. That one might seem strange to you, but that's happened to me many times in my career, where a seller will tell me, this property has been in our family for years. I really want to sell it to someone who appreciates it the way we did. I don't want some builder coming in here, tearing it down, subdividing it, and blah, blah, blah. Okay. So as you can see, in other states, this is something that they have to abide by. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with Seth Wiseman and the Wiseman Law Group. They have several firms throughout the metro area. Seth is our counsel to GAR. He also sits on the contract panel. His firm, I met him many moons ago when he did most of the HOA documents in this city. I think they probably still do. But majority of the HOA bylaws and covenants were written by the Wiseman firm. It was Wiseman, Nowak, and somebody. I forget who the third partner was, but and now it's just Wiseman Law. If somebody's on this call that remembers that, you can yell that out. But just know that fiduciary is not required in Georgia. So let's hear what Seth has to say about that. Let me know if you can hear also.
Hello, everybody. I'm Seth Wiseman, and welcome to another episode of Safe Real Estate. Today, we are going to discuss and hopefully put to bed for once and for all the question of, does any realtor owe their client or customer a fiduciary duty in Georgia? And the answer is no, 1,000 times no. In Georgia, real estate licensees do not owe any fiduciary duties to their clients or customers unless they specifically agree to do so in writing. And I would be the first to say, you never want to agree in writing that you will act as a fiduciary. So the question really is, if that's the law, and actually it's been the law since Beretta was adopted in the early 1990s, so it's been the law for almost 30 years, why is it that so many agents think that they owe a fiduciary duty? And I think the answer, unfortunately, is that it is still taught that you owe fiduciary duties in a lot of pre-licensed programs, and there's a lot of literature coming out of NAR where they discuss the fiduciary duties of real estate agents. And in most states in the United States, realtors do owe a fiduciary duty to their clients. Not owing a fiduciary duty greatly benefits real estate agents. A fiduciary duty is the highest legal duty that you can owe to somebody. It is akin to being a guardian or a trustee. And frankly, attorneys also owe fiduciary duties, but real estate licensees only owe a duty to exercise reasonable care on behalf of their clients. And by adding this language, it significantly reduces your potential legal liability. But one of the things you never want to do is to talk to your clients and say, well, as you know, I owe you a fiduciary duty, because one of these days, a buyer or seller may write that into a brokerage engagement agreement, and you will be stuck owing these very high duties to your clients and customers, which could create a situation where you are much more potentially liable to them. So in closing, you do not owe fiduciary duties to anyone. It's a great benefit that that is the law in Georgia. Please, please never say, I am your fiduciary, because in Georgia, that is just not the case. As always, it's great to see you. Please continue to tune in. Bye now.
Comments? Ahas? WTF? Have you been saying it? Any comments on, did you already know this? And the reason reason I brought this up, because we have had a situation of someone saying that enough times that they had a savvy buyer that filed a complaint, and what, other things went along with it, and that word came up. And then I also had an agent in our office that recently went to a class and called me and said, "Did you know?" And I'm like, "Yeah." Hopefully I know. Did you know? And they did not. And this was kind of like news to them, and they've been in the business for a while. I don't think that is news to you guys. I think it's um, when we glaze our eyes over when we go to license law and ethics, and we hear Bretta, and we know that's just like a lot of legalese that everybody kind of goes over your head. But when we're talking about Bretta, we're talking about our reasonable care to the customer, client, consumer. Go right ahead, Carlin.
Oh yeah, what I didn't realize, and I think, like you said, I kind of understood we are not fiduciaries, or have remembered it from somewhere or something, but I was not aware that the level of, if you say fiduciary, the level of responsibility and information that you would be then required to divulge.
Right.
It's a lot higher than I knew it was a higher standard. I did not realize it was that high.
It applies to realtors, attorneys, doctors. All of those things have, in some cases, fiduciary. So when they adopted this in Georgia, it really limited our liability. And I'm going to show you in the contracts that we have where this is spelled out. And it's been this way for quite some time. So thank you for sharing on it. All right. So you heard Seth talk about reasonable care, duty of care. All of those things mean the same thing. So in Georgia, we're talking about, and you also heard him say, unless expressly agreed. Expressly agreed is in writing. When we talk about expressively agreed, it must be in writing, not text, not a phone call, but in writing. I don't know any good reason that a licensee would be saying, "I'm going to take some liability and write this in here." I think we say things to sound a little bit more professional, a little bit higher level. It's like saying, "I'm an associate broker." That's a class and you pass. It's those that take it a little higher, where you want to be a broker, or you want to run your own company, or you just care about your profession and you want to take more classes to be more knowledgeable. But a broker not deemed to have a fiduciary relationship or obligation to any party. It contradicts common law of agency at times. And broker responsible for exercising ordinary or reasonable care, not the extraordinary care required of a fiduciary, which is what Carlin just said. And this is true even if the consumer is a client. All right. So what does reasonable care look like? All right. So we talked about what fiduciary looks like. Let's see what reasonable care. So when I write an offer, or take a listing, when I go in and put, myself or my assistant goes in and puts everything in, then I will say, "We are sending you a copy of the listing printout so you can make sure that I'm describing the property as we discussed at the listing appointment, and price is right, you like the pictures, so on and so forth," because I want the seller to sign off on that. That's reasonable care, so that everything we talked about at the listing appointment doesn't turn into, well, the agent picked the price and the agent decided what it was going to say, and so on and so forth. I get a lot of broker calls of sellers not liking how their property is described. Okay. And that's a conversation that should happen at your listing appointment. Seller, tell me how you felt when you walked into this home. Tell me what a buyer would really want to know about this home when they walk in the door, and things like that. Now you're going to have the seller who says, "These doorknobs are from Burma." No one's going to care. That's nice. Do you want to take them with you, or are they staying with the house? They're beautiful. You get someone who has no idea where Burma is, then, it doesn't matter. So you can see here an example of a follow-up listing email or letter or whatever it is you do to communicate back to your seller. To the follow-up of our meeting, I want to let you know I've completed the listing package, filed the listing with the MLS services at a listed price of, reminding them again, we're listing this home at $450. And as you know, this price is more or less the same, however you want to say that, as the price recommended on the CMA that we went over and was presented on this particular date. And I look forward to working with you to market and complete a sale at the listing price you selected, and I will keep you informed. When I tell them I'm keeping them informed, my informed date is Tuesday. That gives the buyer and the agents time over the weekend to look at it, to think about it, to make me an offer, maybe call their lender on Monday. And so that's why Tuesday is my follow-up day to my listings. And then any feedback we receive as we're marketing the property. Any questions about that? What do you think about that? Does anybody else have something that they use to show reasonable care? And if not, say, no, but I will. You guys are on vacation today. Yes, no, maybe. Okay, let's move on to the buyer side then. All right, so how many of you have received the question from the buyer? What should I offer? So you do comps, you pull the listing information, you pull the tax records, maybe you have some other resources that you use, RPR, things of that nature, to help that buyer understand what this home is listed for and what the neighborhood is going for and what kind of market we're in. So you're doing all those things with that customer or client. So then you might say something like this: I just wanted to let you know that your offer on the property at blah, blah, blah has been presented to the seller. That's a great thing to do. When I fill out a contract and I send it to the buyer, I send it to them as a PDF first so we can go through it. I don't send it to them as a DocuSign for them to sign, because what's going to happen? They're not reading it. They're not looking at the fine print. They're not looking at the dates that could cause them to lose their earnest money. This way I have their undivided attention to the bits and pieces of the contract. Then I send, and once everything is satisfactory to them, then I will send it as a DocuSign for them to just go click, 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 click. Okay. And as you remember, we discussed market conditions, which I do. I call that CETO for any of you that have been to my contract class. That means come into the office. Not necessarily physically. Back in the day it was. Now it might be over Zoom, or it might be in the office, or it might be at the home. Of the market conditions and the listed price, your motivation, and what we know of the seller's circumstance before you decided on the offer price. What I mean by motivation is, have you ever had the buyer who says, I want to look at homes, let's call it $450, but then they want to make an offer of $300? Should we be looking at $300, or are we going to look at $450? So you might want to say something to the buyer like, you know what, I'm obligated to make the offer that you have requested. However, if the seller doesn't respond or the seller counters, are you willing to pay at least $450? When you ask that type of question and the buyer says yes, then you know, okay, let's go ahead and let you lose your first offer. Or you know that they will possibly come up to that price. I'm not saying they have to pay full price or over and all these different things, but you as the professional need to know if you're dealing with someone with the proper motivation. Okay. And what we know of the seller's circumstance before you decided to make the offer. And I will, of course, let you know as soon as I hear anything from the listing agent, and we can go from there. Until then, let's keep our fingers crossed, or I usually say fingers, toes, and eyes. So any questions about that? Anyone have any problems presenting in this way? Do you see how this is really putting a bow on it, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, so that if you had a problem with a buyer or seller and you were able to show me your transaction communication with them, then I would see that you've posed the reasonable care. And why this is also important: if someone files an E&O against you, the first thing that the investigator, when they call me, they want to know if I have a complete GAR contract, have we used all the correct contracts and forms, and what kind of reasonable care? And reasonable care would be in the form of written expression, like emails, things of that nature to keep people informed as to what's going on. Okay. Any questions about this? Any ahas about this?
That this should be in an email, not in a text.
Yeah. I have to remind agents regularly that the reason that the signature page has phone number, fax number, and email as reasonable communication components. If you don't put a fax number, then that is not a way that you can deliver anything to that other party. If you don't put an email, then that means you cannot deliver anything by email. If you only put a phone number, that's the only way you can communicate back and forth. Now, no one's doing that. We're putting phone number, we're putting email, and I'm noticing fax number is not there anymore. And one of the reasons, I don't think anybody's using a fax machine, but I still have an e-fax. And technically, and we've gotten away from this, technically you learned in pre-license that when you make an offer, you're supposed to send it to the brokerage and the agent and the licensee. We don't do it. And I think now it's not a problem, but when I started in the business, an agent easily would say to me, I didn't get it. I don't have it. And by sending it to the brokerage, then the front desk or whoever was managing that fax machine or e-fax when we evolved into e-fax could say, oh no, it came in on Sunday at 7:00, even though that agent said on Monday they didn't receive it. So sometimes you may want to go back to basics if you've got a difficult situation. That's why the brokerage information is always filled out completely. The address, the phone number, the fax number, all those things. In the event, let's say you're out of the country or you're out of town or your phone died, someone's trying to reach you. The first thing they do is call the broker. I can't get so-and-so on the phone. It's not my favorite call to get because that's ridiculous. But when I do get that call, it's because they cannot reach you based on whatever you put on that back page. That's one of the reasons, I should say. I won't say it's the only reason. Okay. All right, so let's look at our GAR contracts and where all this stuff is spelled out going, okay, I didn't know this, or I did know this, and where does it say that? Now, it's not going to say in our GAR contracts that we don't owe our customers and clients fiduciary. What it does say is our authority and responsibilities, and it tells what we have a duty to and what we don't have a duty to. And if you notice, I highlighted several places where it says it many times. We shall have no duty. It is not our responsibility to inspect the property or advise the buyer or seller on things. That is for inspections. That is for the buyer or seller to hire the appropriate people to tell them what's good, bad, and ugly. We tend to go overboard because we call it customer service. And there's a way to do it without jeopardizing your liability. When I talk to someone about things that are above and beyond that step over the boundaries, I may say it jokingly, I only play an attorney on TV, but I would suggest that you hire your own independent attorney. I am not an attorney. I can tell you my experience, but I can't advise you on X, Y, and Z. Okay. So that's giving you an idea in all of our brokerage agreements, listing agreement, buyer, non-exclusive, all of them say the limits on the broker's authority and responsibilities. We shall owe no duties to the seller nor have any authority on behalf of the seller other than what is set forth in the agreement. So whatever's in the listing agreement is really all we have a responsibility to. But you get sellers that call upset saying, they didn't do this, they didn't do that, blah, 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 blah. You have to point these things out to them. Okay. Shall not be responsible for ensuring that the seller complies with the duties and deadlines. How many times has a seller called and complained to you or to me? I didn't know that my due diligence was over. I didn't know the financing contingency. I didn't know that I had to respond back on the low appraisal by such and such. That is why we have documents that you can give to them, like the dates. I call it the dates to remember. I don't think that's what it's called, but for those of you that aren't familiar with that form, it's a form that once you go binding, it's a one-page form that you can go and put all the dates that apply to your contract and give it to all the parties. Reasonable care to say, now that we're under contract, congratulations, everyone. Here's all of our deadlines. It's not your responsibility to make anybody read it, but it could be your responsibility and reasonable care to give it to them. And we shall not be responsible for ensuring that those sellers comply with those duties and deadlines. Everyone on this call, and unless you're brand smacking, your license is still, the signature is still wet, we have had those clients, and if you haven't, you will, if you're in this business any length of time, that a seller will say, I didn't know the deadlines, you gave them a copy of the contract. You're obligated to give them a copy of the contract. Okay, when you've been in the business long enough, you guys, can anybody yell out how long we have to keep our files? All of our contracts, the brokerage, not necessarily the licensee, but the brokerage. How long do we have to hold files?
7 years?
I got a 7. Anybody else?
3 years.
Francois, how long have you been in the business? Am I saying your name correct?
Yes, you are.
I love Paris and I love Italy. So when I saw your name, I'm like, I love it. And do you have a nickname or you'd go by Francois?
I go by Fanny. It's much easier.
Okay, well, okay, that's I'm calling you Francois.
Thank you. I like that.
So how long have you been licensed?
Almost a year.
Okay, you know why she knows the right answer? She's only been licensed a year. You heard Carlin. Carlin's been in the business for a while, but Carlin, our newbie on the call, is correct. It's 3 years. And I had a client call me I had 5 of my database, because we've been working our database, and 5 people from my database called me for various different reasons. And the longest person out of the 5 called asking for a copy of their file because they were trying to sue someone in the neighborhood, and they paid a premium on their lot. I have all of my files since the day I started until about 10 years ago. And Delta Credit Union had a shredding day. And my husband and I put boxes, because there was no transaction management system, in both our cars and drove over there to shred. I was nervous the whole time, like, I have held on to these files for a long time. I know as soon as I throw this box in that giant machine, someone's going to call me. And that did happen. But recently I had someone that contacted me from, I think I sold to them in 2001 or something like that. I shredded all the way to 2010. And so I don't have the file. And also, when I called my old office, because I used to be the team leader in East Cobb, and that's where I started with Keller Williams, they didn't have it either. So I may have it on one of these graveyard laptops or desktops that I'm going to have to figure out what's the password to get in and look at. I'm sure I have it, but I don't physically have it. So you may have clients down the road. You guys are in a little bit better situation because you can save them on a drive, a disk. That didn't happen when I started. So just think about that as you go along in your career. They might ask for this, but you're not obligated to keep those files more than 3 years. And the brokerage is not obligated to keep it more than 3 years either. Our brokerages, through Command, through the transaction systems we have been keeping them probably 7, which is why Carlin probably said 7. And then they purge because, you can only keep so much. So just want to kind of share that with you in case you were wondering, oh, the brokerage keeps it forever. They do not. 3 years is all they're obligated to. All right. Any questions about that? Then you shall be indemnified and held harmless by the seller from any and all claims caused of action or damages arising out of or relating to the following: inaccurate or incomplete information provided by the seller to the broker. It's the reason why when I list something, I will send it to them so they can look it over and get their thumbs up. Yep, I like that. Or could you change that word? Or I don't like that picture, or whatever the case may be. Right? So now, even though I didn't have to do that, I'm doing that so that I can get them to sign off on that. Or earnest money handled by anyone other than the broker. So everyone always goes for the low-hanging fruit or the deep pockets, Keller Williams being the deep pockets. But we all know that sometimes we ask the attorney to hold the earnest money. And if the attorney holds the earnest money, they're the holder. So a lot of times I'll get a call saying, we've got the dispute, and da 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 da. And the first thing I will ask you is, who's holding the earnest money? If you tell me it's the attorney, you're going to have that conversation with the attorney. However, the attorney could call me as the broker or call Tom and ask, hey, I want to talk this out with you. They normally don't, but they're going to write the 10-day letter of dispute. They're going to make the decision who will receive the earnest money, and that's the end of it. If that buyer or seller is still upset about it, they will need to hire legal counsel to go after that person. But it has nothing to do with you, the licensee, or the brokerage. Okay? So you may even want to say, you may want to explain that to your customers and clients, that we're going to have the attorney hold the earnest money. Are you okay with that? Because I think sometimes we make that decision, and then if it becomes a problem, then they're upset with you. Like, I didn't know that that's what was going to happen if we had a dispute. Seller's negligence or intentional wrongdoing, that happens every now and again, but I don't see that as much. Any loss or theft of valuables. You don't even know how many calls I get about someone calling me, telling me about something that's missing or something that happened. Or, look, when you go to a listing appointment, you should be telling that seller, if you think it has value, lock it up. If you don't want anybody messing with it, put it up. All those different things. You should be guiding them and consulting them in that type of situation. The existence of undisclosed material facts about the property or the transaction, and any damages or injuries. I had an agent one time that called me and said another agent tripped and fell and broke her iPad, and she wanted her to pay for it and Keller Williams to pay for it. And I'm going to call your broker. And she did. And I was like, I cannot believe I'm getting this call. You tripped and fell and broke your iPad, and that's Keller Williams' issue. It's not. Don't carry your iPad with you. Leave it in the car or something like that. So at the end of the day, I think understanding your fiduciary versus reasonable care will take a lot of stress off of you guys. Not to say, hey, not me, not me, not me. You still want to be professional about it. You want to be polite about it, but it's just a matter of explaining things to people so they just don't even go there. It's in the contract. And then broker's duty to buyer. Broker's sole, notice I highlighted sole duties to the buyer shall be 4 things. We probably do 400, but only 4. Make all disclosures required by law. Attempt to locate properties suitable for your buyer. Comply with all BRETA, and assist to the extent requested by the buyer in negotiating the terms. That's it. Not hiring the appraiser, not hiring the pool guy, not hiring the termite guy, not doing any of those things. Those are the only 4 things. Those should be pointed out to your buyer. Now, can your buyer receive a vendor's list from you? Can your buyer ask your opinion? Can your buyer ask, what's your experience? Yes. We're not saying just be stoic and go, I can only do 4 things. You don't want to do that. But I want you to understand what you are obligated only with reasonable care, and not put yourself in a situation of someone feeling like you are not representing them. Any questions about that? Any ahas about that? No? All right. So go ahead, Carlin.
So the care that you give to a client is going to be different than you give to a customer. Where of those four little ones there, do they also include someone you're working with as a customer?
Yes.
Or, oh, they do. Okay.
Yes. This is the reasonable care includes customers. Yes.
Okay.
Good question. Thank you for that. Anyone else? All right. So in conclusion, can everybody unmute and say it with me? Never say, I have a fiduciary responsibility to you.
I have a responsibility to you.
Thank you. Thank you. But you can say, I can exercise reasonable care. And what I wanted you to understand today is the difference between the two. Everybody mute because I can hear wind in the background. At the end of the day, I wanted you to understand the difference, and that for so long, and you've probably heard your colleagues at the water cooler saying it, you've probably seen it. If you've got it on your website, I have the best customer service and I'm going to give you fiduciary. You need to get it off of there now. Whether I'm your broker or not, you need to get it off of there. If you've got it on any marketing materials, if you've got it on your business card, unfortunately, use those up. And then when you reprint, don't put that on there, because you are basically handing out liability. That's basically what you're doing. Okay? Any questions? So for those of you that have never been on Broker Chat before, we do Broker Chat twice a month on a Monday from 12 to 1. Tom Fulkerson is our qualifying broker for all 6 offices, and we alternate. And basically, we try to come up with a topic, but this really is for you to jump on and ask questions. You may have something going on right now with a transaction, or something that happened in the past that still has you scratching your head about. This is the forum for that. Also, I teach contract class. I will be teaching a contract class the 7th, I think it's the 17th and 18th. If somebody will look at their calendar, I think that's a Tuesday and Wednesday. Or it could be a Monday and Tuesday. Regardless, the first day, you will get 3 hours CE. I didn't have time to get the second class certified, so only the first class will be certified. The first class I call 101, and that is basically the purchase and sale agreement and all the things you want to put with that purchase and sale agreement to make a good offer. Okay, and then the second day will be amendments, exhibits, brokerage agreements, things of that nature. So the meat and potatoes will be featured on the first day, and you will get 3 CE. So you do have to show up on time. You do have to stay the entire time to get those credits. I don't think it's going to be Zoomed. So if you're about to ask me that, when I teach CE, I prefer, except for when we were in the throes of COVID, I prefer not to have to go back and forth between Zoom and give the full attention to the class. Okay, so for those of you who have been to that class, we know that class is gone for 6 hours sometimes. I'm going to have to shorten it down to 3 hours, and I will. I'm working on that as we speak. But if you have not subscribed to Wiseman's videos that come out once a month, sometimes every 2 weeks, it's not really, I haven't found it to be very consistent. I think a new one just came out about liability. So I think he's up to video 70. So if you've not watched these videos, I would go back, and you can go in the search bar and type in, like you see right here, I put in referral, and I was looking for referral agreements, and that video popped up and I could watch that. So you just subscribe here, and then what'll happen, your phone will ding and say, Wiseman just uploaded a new video to YouTube, and you can watch that. The videos are no more than anywhere from 1 minute to 4 minutes, depending on the topic, but they're very quick. You can listen to them in the car. And a lot of times when he does send them and he gives us some new special tips or some new things to use for Midtown, I put those in Remind under KWAM01, which is our filing cabinet. And you will see I will condense those so you don't have to keep watching the video and writing it down. I usually get that from him and put it in the filing cabinet. And I'm not sure if the office puts that in command for you guys, but if you're familiar with Remind and how to get to your contracts there, you'll find that filing cabinet labeled Keller Williams Atlanta Midtown or KWM01. And there's I always put little nuggets in there, so you should check it from time to time.
Could you put the link in the chat, please?
The link for that? Ooh.
Yeah.
Adam, do you know the link for that? Can you do that for me?
I'll see.
Since you were putting stuff in the link, thank you. All right, so let's open up the floor. It's about 12:44, and we've got about 15 minutes. If you have to leave, thank you for attending. If not, if you've got some questions about today's topic, or if there's something, other burning questions, I want to put out there, how's the market for you? How are your offers going now? See a different change in the way that things are being negotiated? I am.
You know, sellers are willing to negotiate more than they have been in a long time, and buyers are feeling that power that they can maybe get more from the sellers. That's on the good side.
Yeah. And if you're new to the business, and for instance, we had someone just a year, they don't know any different. They saw a market that was like hot and heavy and multiple offers, and that's not a typical market. What we're in now is a typical market. You're going to have to go back to basics, which I guarantee you, if you take Adam's class, he's going to talk about that kind of thing. You're going to have to do your due diligence with your business and in whining and dining, so to speak, that buyer and seller, in order for them to select you, in order for them to keep you, in order to sign with you. It's not going to be, oh, you've got a lockbox, can you open this door? And I'm ready to write an offer. I'm not saying those days are over. There are probably some markets and pockets that are still experiencing that. But as this year goes on, that will wind down a little bit. I don't want to throw cold water and make this sound doom and gloom. It is still a good market. It's still a good time to be a realtor. It's still a good time. It's the work that you're going to have to do. That's really, I'm speaking from experience. That's the work you're going to have to do. And basically 2023 started last week, October, because this is the last quarter. And if your fourth quarter is healthy, you go into the beginning of the year healthy. So if you're like me and my business looks like crap right now, I've got some explaining to do to my business plan. So I'm the first to admit, I've got a lot on my plate. There's some things that I'm going to take off my plate to be a little bit more focused for 2023. 2022 was quite interesting for me this year. Anyone else want to testify? Anything going on out there that you want to ask me about that's weird or odd? I'm trying to think of some things that have recently happened. I'm finding just people are missing deadlines. I'm not quite sure why. I guess maybe going on vacation and stuff like that, and forgetting to make sure somebody's watching their business, or I don't know what it is. Is the earnest money loss is happening because of deadlines. Inspections are being missed, contingencies, just different things like that. Please remember, we're in fourth quarter. In fourth quarter, we have the most holidays, banking days off, things of that nature. Pay attention to that calendar when you're writing contracts. So like, for instance, if somebody wrote a contract and put today for something, today's a banking holiday. So unless everything ended up in the attorney's office Friday, that closing got pushed to Tuesday. Okay, so pay attention to those type of things. Francois, have you had any transactions yet? She's like, oh my God, you're putting me on the spot. It's okay if you haven't.
Sorry.
Have you had any
Okay.
transactions yet or problems?
I had one seller but he's been renovating his house for the last couple months. And I have one buyer under contract. Also have like 4 rentals. I'm working on one. It's going to close tomorrow.
Well, congratulations, top producer, in the making.
Hopefully.
Very nice, very nice. So Adam, I'm going to give you a few more minutes if you had a chance to look up the time and date on that class and let everyone know about it. And so if you're in another market center, remember we're the heart of Atlanta. You can take classes in any market center. That's why I'm inviting you to contract class. If you don't have one in your market center, you're welcome to come to Midtown as long as we have space. So Adam, take it away. We'll wrap up.
I placed it in the chat. It's Monday, the 24th of this month. So I believe week after next. It's at 12:30. We're going to go for about 2 hours, and it is a workshop. It will not be on Zoom. I move around the room way too much to be able to be on a Zoom camera. So very interactive. But again, really, like you said, Deborah, going back to basics. So I'm all about talking about ways to lead the sale, different conversation techniques you can use so that you don't get into order taking mode. Maybe when you're working with somebody, some other things we'll be focusing on is something called the elevator pitch, which is really great for a new agent, making sure that if you are in a situation where you only have a short moment to introduce yourself and tell somebody what you do, you'll be writing your own elevator pitch and maybe practicing that a little bit in the class as well. And then finally, just giving everybody some networking ideas, and especially when some of the colleagues feel really stuck in their business, I like to ask them, so tell me about your living situation, tell me about your neighborhood. And then we just start talking like, well, have you tried this? Have you done this? And it's like, no, I haven't. And a lot of these things don't cost you anything. It's just getting out there, getting out of your house and, going out and shaking hands and being bold and fearless, which is really important in this business. So, yeah, it's a lot of information we talk about in those 2 hours.
I love that class ever since you started that. And I think that's great because for those of you that are new to the business, Adam was fairly new when he started. He's doing fantastic. And now he's giving back in the market center by teaching those practices. And so, there's a difference between hearing it from someone who's 20 years in the business and someone who's newer in the business. There's a different perspective because he's going to talk more about social media and I'm not. Okay. I'm just like, I have somebody else that does that. And it just doesn't interest me as much as it would for the group of agents that are coming into the business more, even though I know we need to do it and so on and so forth. I'm not poo-pooing on it. It's just that, my back to basics is a little bit different, but always the foundation is back to basics. Always the foundation is, shaking hands and kissing babies. That doesn't go away no matter what type of technology shows up. So thank you so much for doing that, Adam, and volunteering your time to do that. And I'm going to wrap this up. We're going to finish a little bit early today. I appreciate everyone that attended today. I'm not sure, today is the 10th. So I think the 24th is the next broker chat, and that will be Tom hosting that. I'm not quite sure what his topic is for this month. So if you have a topic, this particular topic was volunteered by someone who had been on a call before. So if you have something you want us to cover, let Tom know or let Nayala know, and we'll make sure we cover that for you. And thank you so much for attending. And you guys have a great day. Go sell some real estate.